we've been doing our depth charts. We've got the last one to come. It is the back three, and I'm delighted to say Luke Fitzgerald is with us this morning. Luke, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are things?
So your depth chart's really interesting because I think you've gone for who you would pick, right? And am I right in saying James Lowe is top of your depth chart after his heroics in the November internationals?
Yeah, he is for that 11 slot. I thought he showed a lot of improvement. I think defensively is probably the area that most people were concerned about, and I thought he showed some improvement there. My worry with him is that he thinks that that's finished. Probably that interview after the New Zealand game maybe leads me to that conclusion, but we wait and see. I hope he doesn't think he's the finished article there, because I think in attack, he's just so strong. He provides something different, brilliant athlete, great footwork, but I thought the ball handling ability that he has probably differentiates him a little bit, and I think that's probably why he's top of that chart in the 11th slot. I think his ability to link up play behind either forwards or one of your centres really releases the likes of your Keenans, your Conways, these guys. So that's why he's there. I think he's playing really great rugby, and I hope to see him back fit pretty soon, because I think he's become an important player for Ireland.
Yeah, I haven't heard a prognosis on when he might be back. It was just kind of news that he was out because Leinster basically hadn't played rugby in, it seems like, 15 years. We didn't know that he was out long term, then he wasn't in the squad at all. So he won't be there. You've got Keith Earls next on the 11 list, and then Simon Zebo in third for number 11. Talk to us about your pecking order here. Why is Earls ahead of Zebo? And do you expect then Earls to start against Wales?
I do, yeah. Look, I just like Keith Earls as a player. I think his defensive play has really come on. He's very strong there. I think he's an arch finisher. Like, his try record for Ireland is brilliant. Zebo is, of course, as well. But I just like Keith Earls in there. I think he's playing well for a long time. He's obviously very experienced. And I just think he gives you that little bit of X factor in if you can get him into open space. So that's why I have him there. It's a pretty tight call. I mean, Zebo's been injured as well for a little bit, and probably that's why he sits just behind Keith Earls for me. I always think it takes him a little bit longer to get back in gear after injuries. I don't think he's an unbelievable trainer. I think he's probably coming into a part of his career where that might end up hurting him. We wait and see. I hope I'm wrong on that, because he's a player that I really admire and like. He is very much in that James Lowe build. And there's probably a fairly frequent theme when we go through this depth chart. I think Zebo's ball handling ability is something that I think it's probably a little bit underutilised at Munster at the moment, but he's well, I'm not going to get onto my 15 depth chart just yet, but he just missed out there, because I just think that's a bit of an X factor thing for him. I know he gets a lot of tries and he's got a lovely left boot, but the ball handling ability for me, I just think the way Ireland are playing at the moment, since the November internationals, that little bit more expansive game plan. You need players like this, because I don't think Ireland have unbelievable playmakers outside Johnny Sexton and whoever plays at 9 for us. So your 15s and your wingers become really, really important to you. And that's probably why Zebo's in there, having not played too much, but I think he's just behind Keith Earls for me, and that might just be a preference thing for me.
It felt, maybe this was 2019 when Hedenshaw played at 15, that there was a real sort of consensus that allowing Simon Zebo to go to France was just a bad move for Ireland, or there was talk once again for the millionth time about the rules and maybe making an exception for Zebo like they made an exception for Sexton. That felt in the context of 15, Luke, if I'm not misremembering. So why have things changed since his return to Munster that it's pretty certain that if he's going to play, it's going to be on the wing as opposed to being back up to Hugo Keenan?
Yeah, well, look, I think we brought it naturally brings us on to that 15 slot, doesn't it? I think Keenan has really shone over the last year or two. He's become a key player for Leinster, but also a key player for Ireland. And I just like he's not the first name down on the team sheet, but he's pretty close at this stage. The fitness levels, I think, from his sevens days, he just looks so game for the fight all the way through. Again, he's got great ball handling ability. I think that plays nicely to this Irish team where there's lots of good athletes. And I think, we just don't have those big, heavy guys. So we have to play that kind of game we played in November. And Keenan suits that perfectly. He's a defensive, he's solid at the back in terms of the defensive side of things. He's good in the air. And he's got a nice kicking game too. I think he's really rounded himself out nicely, and he's become a really key player in both teams. Zebo very good at all those things. I think when you look back at that move, I think there was a clash with Joe Schmidt there. I probably touched on the training aspect with Zebo. That probably wouldn't have sat well with Joe, who was all about training as you play. Zebo's very much he's a pretty relaxed guy in lots of respects. Brilliant rugby player, and a flair player. And I think at times you felt like if probably Joe wound him up a little bit too tight, and that's probably not how he likes to feel going out in the pitch, because he likes to express himself out there. And I think that move probably suited everyone. Zebo got paid well, and he was probably not going to be. It was probably hard for Joe to select him because he's just a different character than Joe would probably generally, I think, lean towards. So. Keenan's there ahead of Zebo, and I think Zebo probably just hasn't shown enough in the Munster jersey yet to be in that 15 conversation. So that's why he's on top of the pops there and doesn't show in my 15 depth chart yet.
Is it just the case as well that maybe Haley is a little bit underrated in the national conversation, and that's why Zebo is just playing more on the wing for Munster? I guess what I'm trying to ask is there a reason why we've seen just more of him on the wing, even for club, Luke, over the last little while?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of both. I'm never really convinced by Haley. I actually think he looked pretty good the last couple of times I've watched him. Looks pretty strong with the ball. But I don't really feel like he's got anything outstanding about his game. I love Zebo at 15. It's my favourite position for him. As I said, I love the ball handling ability, but he's got that left boot as well. He's pretty cultured there with that. It's a lovely weapon for him, and he uses it well. I like that he can pop up with a bit of a free role at fullback. And I actually think he's not a big hitter in defence, but he reads the game well there, and he's actually a very good defender. He rarely gets himself in too much trouble without being a big hitter or anything like that. He's very good there, underrated part of his game, and also he's brilliant in the air. So I would probably, if I was playing, if I was the Munster coach, I'd be selecting him at 15. But it looks like whether it's because they like Haley, or because they think that Zebo's just better on the wing, or maybe he needs to play himself into a bit more form, or show them something else there. I don't know why, but he would have been the obvious selection for me at fullback, and that's where I would have slotted him in the Munster team, because I think it gives them that little bit of extra, again, that little bit of expansiveness that probably they have been lacking. We've been criticising them for a while. I don't know if you guys have, but we have. I think we saw a little bit, probably a few green shoots there at the end of the pool stage. But I think Zebo would have given them that straight away, and I thought that would have been a lovely slot for him to come back into. But look, we wait and see on that. Maybe a few more games, a bit more game time there, he slots into that 15 role. But if they like Haley at the moment,
it'd be interesting to see if everybody was fully fit. If it is Conway and Earls and Zebo in the back three in whatever constellation, and they could even interchange during the match if they need to. Van Grant did drop Zebo for a European Cup semi-final. I think maybe we underrate that aspect of this whole conversation. I think it was already clear that he was leaving, but he didn't pick him. He picked Dan Wootton ahead of him, didn't he? In the away semi-final the year that he was leaving. So I'm sure the Schmidt thing was the main driver, but definitely, if you're not feeling the love from your head coach as well, and I don't know, maybe next season will be the year that we see the full flowering of whatever is to come at Munster. So that's interesting. Look, so let's go back to the fullback depth chart. You've got Keenan first. After that, you've got Michael Lowry and Jordan Larmour. We were talking with Ron McGarra during the week, and he was talking about finishers and how actually over the course of 83, 84, 90 minutes, or however long a game actually lasts these days, that in that final 10, 15 minutes, you need players who are going to be able to have an impact. Larry was the one who came to mind for me immediately, like the footwork and the speed. So what's your instincts about where Larry can go? What's his ceiling in an Ireland shirt?
I'd say my instincts are the same as yours, Ger. I think he's really impressed me in that Ulster jersey. I know he can play a little bit of 10 as well. Again, that recurring theme of ball handling ability. I just think it's so important for this Irish team now, if they're going to be playing that faster brand. That footwork. And again, some of the smaller guys, Larmour as well, I'm probably including this, they can kind of be a nightmare to deal with. I know myself, having played against a few of these guys, that, your Shane Williams, sometimes they're the most difficult players on the pitch to mark. And again, the longer you get into the game, some of those smaller people probably come into the game a little bit more there, because they're just not carrying as much weight, you know, and I think, their fitness levels are generally high, and that's when they can really hurt you because they're hard to get your hands on them. So that's why I like Lowry in there. I think he's played brilliantly for Ulster. And I think, look, Larmour's behind him at the moment in that 15 depth chart in my mind. But that's just a virtue of probably Lowry playing at 15 all the time as well. I do think Jordan Larmour's, an excellent fullback there. Just been ousted by Hugo Keenan, who's been playing brilliantly. So that's why Larry's there, and that's probably why Larmour's there too. I just think they're difficult to contain. If teams are tired, you've been scrummaging, you've been mauling for 80 whatever long you were saying, 83, 84 minutes, whatever it is. The last thing you want to see is someone like Larmour or Larry popping up around the pitch, in your channel. It'd be a nightmare to try and contain. So that's why those two guys are there. Very, very attack-minded. I think they do, they are smaller guys. You think they might be there to be attacked in the air, possibly, but I think they've both actually held their own in that respect. And from an attacking perspective, difficult to contain. I probably picked these two guys based on my own feelings around marking people like this. Very, very difficult to defend against. So that's why they're there, I think, guys.
Yeah, and it does feel like this coaching ticket will be happy to have a player like that in the backfield, knowing that there might be a bit of a trade-off in terms of defence, but your attack is going to be more important over the course of the full game, and so therefore we're willing to take that risk. Whereas in the Joe Schmidt era, I'm not sure any of those lads would have been given the head at fullback in particular. So let's try and look at the right wing here, because I think we can have the conversation really about the match day 23 as well with this one. So on the right wing, who have you gone for?
I gone for Conway first. I just really like Conway. I think he's probably a bit of the Lee Halfpenny mould about him in the air. Like, he's quite a small guy, but he really is so good there. Very committed, excellent technique. I think the high ball has gotten a lot of grief, particularly that box kick. But it's still such an important part of the game. Conway's brilliant at that. He's also an excellent finisher, and I think he's in great form. He probably could have slotted somewhere into that depth chart at 11, but I just like him on the right wing because I think he's playing there more regularly. He's got a nice right-footed kicking game, which I think he's improved massively. So yeah, that's why Conway's at the top of the chart there, followed very closely by Larmour and Balakoon. Now, I was really torn about who I was going to have in this second slot. It's probably the position I picked, or I spent the most time kind of selecting, is this second slot behind Conway. Balakoon has been brilliant. He's a big guy. He's got that real top end pace. He's played well for Ulster. He looks strong. He looks like he's put on a little bit of strength as well into his game, just by virtue of probably time training. He's been brilliant for Ulster. He just misses out to Larmour for me because I probably based this on experience in an Irish jersey, and that was it, because I think this is a really tight call at the moment, because I think Larmour's played himself back into my mind in terms of his last couple of weeks. Obviously didn't, had a tricky little period there where he lost a little bit of form, but I think he looks like he's back to his old self. I mean, against Bath, some of the lines that he cut, he just looks so dangerous, and if you get him on open field, same as Larry, smaller guys, but the footwork and the pace, they're just a nightmare to try and contain. So just beats out Balakoon there, and I think probably, again, that was the late push in terms of the form, but also experience in the Irish jersey, and that probably rounds out my depth chart in those three positions, lads.
And look, the depth chart's obviously a very blunt instrument. You pick the individual positions in and of themselves, but for a match day 23, the flexibility of the individuals that we're talking about here, Earls can obviously, at a push, if he's required, play in the centre. Larry, as you mentioned, has a bit of 10 about him. So what would you pick if you had to pick the match day 23? Let's assume that your first three, so it's Keenan, Conway, and who was your left wing? Who was your 11? Sorry,
Keenan, Conway, Earls.
Earls, right?
Oh, it was James Lowe.
James Lowe. So Lowe's not fit. So Earls
right.
Goes in, right? Who's on the bench?
Yeah, I think probably Lowry comes in, or it's probably Carberry's another guy. Like the complexion of the bench, I hadn't actually anticipated you go in this direction with it, to be honest with you. But the bench is a tricky one for me, because I think Carberry covers loads of positions for me. I think his best position is fullback still, but I think they're going to pick him on the bench. You could have Lowry in there because he, could fill into that slot at 10, if you were really, really stuck, I don't think you'd ever put him there. But just if you were really stuck, Larmour as well has played a little bit in the centre. You know, he can play all across the back three. I don't really think it matters where you pick him there as well. Look, if Earls is there, you could probably pick an out-and-out, you know, back three player, because again, as you said, you could slot him in at the centre. So Earls probably gives you all the options if he's on the pitch or on the bench, which I think he will be. So
okay,
I think you can probably pick. Sorry, yeah, go on.
No, I'm interested because that's Balakoon. Balakoon can't get picked anywhere except the wing, but actually you can put him on the bench if Earl starts, because if there's a centre injury, you can move Earls into the centre. And I suppose that's where that flexibility comes.
Yeah, Earls is your Swiss Army knife, isn't he? And I think everyone, it allows you to select a purist, if you like, on the bench. Yeah, so it is great to have players like that. I probably have Lowry and probably Carberry in that mould to a certain extent as well. Just great rugby players can slot them in everywhere.
What's the difference, Luke, between the left wing spot and the right wing spot, really?
Probably less and less as time has gone on. I think there was a big component of it was probably based on your 9 and, you know, what foot he was kicking with back in the day. But other than that, really, I think there's very little in it. You know, I think oftentimes you've less security at, you know, probably on the left wing, particularly from scrum time, because you often lose your 9. But other than that, the rest of the play is very kind of similar these days. You know, yeah, I really, there isn't much of a difference. I think what is very important to me the longer I've gone on is actually having your kicking foot, your main kicking foot as your outside leg. So whatever it is has to be closest to the touchline, because it just bails you out of bad situations. I've always felt that it's a mistake to pick someone on a wing that, you know, a right winger, you know, that's a left footer. Those kind of things, they actually don't really work very well. I think that's a mistake, and that's probably the only thing that dictates who you're picking on the wings at this stage for me, because the rest of the game is very similar. It is nice to have, you know, your main stepping foot as well as your outside foot, but that's probably just a personal preference, really. I do like, I'm saying that because I don't like to have my winger you know, going into touch ever. You never ever want your winger going to touch. You want them to be able to step back hard into the pitch and keep the ball alive for you. And that's probably why you'd have the outside kicking foot too. So that's the only thing that really probably differentiates the positions nowadays, to be honest, guys. Okay,
you could obviously also play centre as well as wing. Is that something that you think is more important and more likely as we trend forward, with maybe some obvious exceptions? Maybe Balakoon in his late 20s becomes somebody who we see as a 13 and we're all like, oh, that was obvious all along, we didn't spot it. But is it actually more important today now for your wingers to be able to slip in seamlessly into the centre, or has that era also passed a bit? What's your take on that?
I don't think there was ever an era for that, Ger. I think it's great for the team, bad for the player. I think you need, at international level particularly, you need to be able to, you have to specialise. You know, I think you have a big problem with lots of guys who are kind of stuck for positions, and I felt that myself throughout my career. I mean, even if you look at my selections there, like all those guys play that position all the time. They're never really switching around. I think the consistency that you have to have playing there week in, week out, that's so important when you come to the highest level. And I think you need to have kind of specialist, nearly body types too, you know. Sounds like a weird thing to say, but you know, when you get to the international level, you know, you need to have a certain size, pace, you know, abilities, you know, that kicking foot, the outside stepping foot, all those things to me are like, you need to have all those little traits to your game. Being able to do a bit of everything well is great for getting you on a bench. It's great for the team because, as you said, like your Earls and these guys, like they bail you out of, you know, you can pick players, specialist players on the bench because of someone like him if he's there, or you can pick him on the bench and he covers everything. But for the player, I just don't think you ever really can reach the heights of being a really great international rugby player. Just my personal opinion on it. Always felt it was a mistake myself. I look at the guys like nowadays who probably fall into that bracket. Your guys like Frawley is the one that really sticks out to me. I think he looks like a brilliant rugby player, can play everywhere, but he's not going to get picked in any of the teams because he hasn't decided to specialise or hasn't pushed the coach hard enough to say, I'm a 10. I can only really play international rugby as a 10, so I need to be playing here week in, week out. So yeah, that's my view on that. And there's probably a few other examples I could give, but that's the one that comes to mind. And when I speak about my own career, it's always one of the things that I thought about myself. I probably should have specialised as a 12 very early in my career. I always thought that would have been my best position. So that's probably my views on that. I'm not sure that is a popular one, but it's definitely my one on it, you know.
What happened at that point? You were just flying on the wing, was it, Luke, that 12 never materialised?
I'd say I got caught in a Leinster team that had a brilliant backline. You know, like you weren't going to be dropping Gordon Darcy for a young pup. Like, you know, that wasn't going to be happening. Like, he was such a brilliant player. You got Brian O'Driscoll in the centre as well at 13. Like, you weren't going to be dropping him, were you? So I probably ended up somewhere. I ended up at 11 probably because I had a left foot kicking game. Dennis Hickey retired, which, you know, that was brilliant for my career. You know, it's funny, sometimes you need someone to move aside. Like that was a brilliant timing for me. And I'd say that's probably, it suited to slot me in there. Like, there was an all-international backline in Leinster. Gervin Dempsey at fullback. Rob Carney was coming behind him when I first came in. And you know, Shane Horgan on the right wing. So, like, you know, Felipe Contepomi at 10, Johnny Sexton just behind him. So pretty stellar backline. And I'd say I just slotted into that position quite nicely because I would probably preferred a left foot step, which always kept the ball in play, had a left foot kicking game and was reasonably quick. And that's probably what got me into that slot there.
That makes sense, yeah. That was really interesting, Luke. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
No worries. For more of that analysis, you can get it on the Left Wing podcast. That's Luke Fitzgerald there giving us his thoughts this morning.